Welcome to Brightful's inaugural Fast Forward podcast. If you don't know us, we're an agency who are dedicated to helping businesses to move forward faster, and we're on a mission to show people how to move forward faster, not just tell them. I'm very proud to say that for our inaugural podcast, I'm joined by Julia Scanlon, Brightful Think Lead.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm also joined by two Chris's. The first is Chris Battersby. He's Community Leader of Project Management at Virgin Atlantic. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Richard.
And we're also joined by another Chris, Chris Muscutt, who's Technical Marketing Manager at Shell. Hi, Chris.
Hiya.
And we thought we'd just start the conversation by first of all asking you, what do your titles mean? So, Community Leader at Project Management at Virgin Atlantic. What does that mean, Chris?
That's quite a new title for me. Essentially, I look after a team of project managers in the technology area at Virgin Atlantic. I've currently got around 18 PMs that I manage, and they work all across the airline. So they run projects in every part of the airline, from airports, projects, engineering, things to do with aeroplanes, anything that sort of has got a technological aspect to it, which is pretty much everything that Virgin do.
Great. And how about you, Chris Muscutt? You're sort of technical marketing manager at Shell. What does that mean?
Yeah, again, it's a new role for me as well, for instance. So, I'm trying to work out how we actually do cross-business marketing, how we join our technology together and talk to customers as one voice.
Great. So, for the sake of the audience here, it should be known that we've had the chance and the fortune to work together previously on various projects. Now, naturally, you're working in sort of quite complex, sort of big, large organisations. Why don't I just kick things off and just say, what for you, in your experience, if someone's listening, that you could give them as a bit of advice to help organisations move forward faster? From you, from Virgin Atlantic's point of view, what's worked for you, and what could people learn from it?
I think at Virgin Atlantic and other places that I've worked in the past, trial and error is a great way of finding out which direction you should move in and to find out how quickly you can move. I can go back to some of the times that we spent, particularly Chris, when we worked in the past, and lots of prototyping, piloting, trying things, not being afraid to make mistakes. Change things when they're perhaps not working as well as they could. We've experimented with different methodologies, with different ways of delivering projects, certainly with different teams of people, changing personnel, bringing people from different parts of the business in. I think you need to use your imagination really, and think about what resources you've got and what you can do with them.
And how do you manage stakeholder expectations? So if you felt fast, sometimes when things don't go quite as planned, how did you go about that?
I'll give you one really good example that's quite funny really, but we were working on trying to speed up the way that we could cross-sell products to individuals, and we had to set up technology, and we had lots of problems which involved trying to get internet to a particular building, and Chris and I were tasked with trying to work around that problem. So we thought, you can get USB dongles, mobile dongles, and trying to actually connect those to PCs, and what we didn't realise was where the PCs were on the ground floor, and there was a reception. So I thought, that's all right, I can get a USB extension lead. So we went and got some USB extension leads, and I ran it up the outside of the building, and it worked. It was brilliant. So we left it working. Everyone was starting to focus on the actual challenge at hand. What we didn't expect was some pigeons to take the USB leads. So they actually tried to pull the dongle off, and so it stopped our project. So we fixed it temporarily, but yeah, it was trying to keep a straight face when we were trying to get the project moving, but it was just unfortunate that
you kind of kept the pigeons.
I know, but obviously, that was trying to work around the blocker, which we couldn't change. I think it was BT, had to install fibre optic, and that's going to take weeks, but we had to prove some deliverables. So it was working around the problem, and I think everyone appreciated that we were trying our best, but obviously were very honest that this isn't the long-term solution. But yeah.
I think that's it. I think if you're approaching the problem in the right way, and if you're bringing your stakeholders along with you on the journey, the occasional mistake and mishap is forgivable. I think people understand that what you're doing is for the good of the business, and that you're doing it in a very sort of positive way. And I guess the things that go wrong are what make it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're recording this podcast from the Royal Society of Arts, the RSA, on John Allen Street, and you may pick up in the background there is some helicopters flying over because we're in the middle of the Extinction Rebellion doing some sort of protests nearby, and sometimes events happen and you have to change. And I'm really interested in when you were in organisations before, sometimes working through a plan. When is it that you found that you need to pivot, you need to change? That pigeon moment, or there's helicopters in the background, or you have to do something different. How easy was that for you to do in the various organisations you worked in?
Sometimes it can be very difficult. There's been some projects that we've worked on in the past where sort of world events have overtaken us and people have been in real danger, and we've needed to get people out of country, which it sort of puts everything into perspective, and the need to sort of move quickly and pivot there is very real. People's safety is at stake. But in the sort of those instances are few and far between. I think in the sort of project world, what I try to do with projects and programs is to sort of isolate any sort of prototyping or testing or piloting that we're doing. Isolate it as much as you can from the rest of the business, so that when it does fail, there's redundancy. We're not going to pilot some new crazy idea, and if it fails, the business stops trading. So it's about limiting the risk and sort of understanding what you're getting into and making sure that you've got fallback procedures, and that ultimately it's that classic thing in IT, you don't test in your live environment. If you can avoid it.
Avoid it all costs.
Yeah.
So I'm mindful because you guys go way back. So you're currently working in different organisations, but you worked in the same organisation before.
Yeah.
How did you two meet?
I think you turned up and sat next to me in Rentokil.
Yeah. I remember my first day at Rentokil Initial, and I pitched up expecting to start my work as a project manager. Didn't know what I was going to be working on, and I was sent to a meeting room where Chris was sitting, and our then boss was kind of standing up with magic markers in his hand, drawing all over whiteboards and flip charts and what have you. And he was mid-flow. He was well into in the arcane depths of this subject that he was talking about. And I sat there for sort of 20 minutes, took it in, and he suddenly pivoted around and pointed at me and said, "What do you think?" And I sat there in front of him and kind of shrugged and said, "I've got no idea. I just walked through the door 20 minutes ago. I don't know." And we had a bit of a laugh about that. But then later, when the guy went out the room, Chris sort of put an arm around me and said, "Hey, don't worry, I'll look after you." We've been firm friends ever since.
Yeah. So you both worked at Rentokil and then at Shell. So tell us a bit about that experience of working together at Shell.
Yeah, for Shell, we started a new program looking at it was transforming how we were actually publishing content to our channels. And I said to my boss that I think I've got a great program manager that manages to really join teams together. So I recommended Chris. I think when you spoke to Ricardo, he both clicked straight away and he was keen to bring you on board. And then I worked in the technology sidearm, trying to help support what we needed to actually deliver it. And Chris managed the program, trying to bring the stakeholders. We were trying to look at exactly how we could challenge such a big problem where everyone was facing this mountain that was impossible to climb. It was trying to break it down into some sizable pieces that everyone can see. I can see how I can deliver to this, and I think it was a magical moment to break such a challenging project. Shell is an enormous company with so many people with their own objectives, and trying to bring that together and actually have a common objective and break that down into, I think it was technology, content, some of the insights part, and forget the fourth one. And I just found it really amazing the fact that we managed to get all these people who wanted to have a voice to have the voice in the right part and feel as though they were contributing to it. And I think if we hadn't done that, I think we would have just faced constant fights. I think on day one when Ricardo told me that we were going to be doing this program, I was thinking, how on earth can we address this with so much, I say internal politics, it's different agendas. Everyone wants to achieve the same thing ultimately, but they've got to do a tiny piece of it, and they're keen to make sure that's separated for them. And I think that project was certainly insightful for me on how to address some of these big challenges.
Sure. Give us a flavour of the scale here, Chris, when we're looking at Shell.
It was enormous. On the face of it, what we delivered was just over 100 corporate websites. So the main one being Shell.com, which is anyone can visit. Shell at that time also had, I think it was around 80 country websites. They were in something like 30 different languages, all with different content that was of different ages and certainly different standards. Some of the stakeholders, so that those websites are Shell's sort of shop window, and that website's super important for all of the main Shell stakeholder groups, and each of these stakeholder groups are effectively enormous multinational companies in their own right. So we had to, I'll pick a couple. Shell Chemicals, for example, at that time, it's a couple of years ago now, but I believe it was the 5th largest chemical company in the world. We'd got Shell Retail, and I always remember what sort of clicked with me to help me understand the scale of Shell Retail is, again, at that time, they had more retail outlets than McDonald's across the world, which again gives you an idea. The Shell recruitment, the people team there are constantly they're trying to attract and get the best talent from across the world. In every country that they operate in, they're working with universities to offer apprenticeships, to get the very best graduates onto their graduate schemes, to attract sort of more experienced workers to come and work for the company. And the website is the primary sort of channel that they use to do that. Shell Aviation. Next time you're sitting on an aircraft waiting to take off and you look out the window, there's a very good chance that you'll see a Shell Aviation truck that's fueling the airplanes. Shell Marine. I could go on and on. Yeah, and honestly, any one of those stakeholder groups in isolation, it would be a challenge to deliver for them. When you're dealing with, I think there were probably 12 major stakeholder groups, like the ones that I just mentioned, and we had to deliver one platform, one product that served the needs of these 12 different stakeholders and their audiences.
So was there a moment where you felt like, okay, we're getting the hang of this? Like, how far into the project did you feel like, okay, now we're sort of starting to take control of this, or how long did it take to sort of find a flow with? Because I can imagine the beginning could be quite.
I think because of the different streams, I think each stream had, a high and a low. I think that's safe to say. I mean, the technology one, I remember us kind of agreeing internally, then going away and then finding out, oh my goodness, our view is very different to someone else. So I think each stream was actually different, but I think certainly, the support at a high level. I remember Simon, who's the ultimate sponsor for this, was really well engaged with you and Ricardo, trying to make sure he was resolving some of the big issues. And I think that senior stakeholder support is so important. And it's always something people talk about, but if someone's not passionate about the programme, but they're just supportive, it just doesn't work, because it's more, send me an email. If they can't get passionate about what you're doing, then they just won't be able to get involved with trying to resolve some of the issues. And I do think that was one of the key successes.
I think maintaining that passion and that energy was difficult. It was from beginning to end. It was a 3-year, nearly 4-year program. It's easy to get people engaged and excited and wanting to contribute for a 3-6 month project. But when you
So how did you do that? How did you keep the excitement going? Because as I said, like 3-6 months,
I think we recognised the different phases of the project. So towards the end, when we were rolling out websites, and there was some days where we would deploy 6 websites in a day, brand new websites, in different countries, different time zones. That was a very different challenge to the early days when we had a few sort of terrifying moments where we were sitting literally with a blank sheet of paper in front of us, saying, "What are we going to do?" I think it was about recognising the nature of the challenge at each of the different phases, and that certainly for me helped keep it fresh, because the rollout project felt almost like a different. It felt like a different project to the early days when we were sitting and experimenting So I think it was sort of recognising that, using that fact to your advantage. So making sure that we involved the right people at the right times. There were actually relatively very few people who were involved for the whole 3-year project, and both you and I were, but we needed different people at different times. So people came in, people dipped out for a phase, and then they'd be back in again.
So the learnings we can take from that type of scale of the program is get the fundamentals, the principles you talked about, getting that strategy right, organising yourself through pods, so getting a point person for data insights, point person for content, point person for UX and design, point person for tech and organisation capabilities, and treat it like a roadmap, and then make sure that you have senior stakeholder engagement, where you have these regular check-ins. But if you do not have someone like Chris Battersby here as your central project manager driving it through, you can kind of get slightly lost in that momentum. So that was part of the Shell sort of roadmap program. Chris Battersby, I'm interested to know how the change was. I know that you previously worked with Virgin Atlantic. So culturally, was there a different way of working in terms of moving from huge multinational sort of energy company into sort of Virgin Atlantic? What was that transition like? And have you been able to bring some of the learnings you've had before at Rentokil with Shell into Virgin Atlantic, or is it a very different beast?
It's very different. Project management and program management is, there's a lot of commonality. It doesn't, in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter what company you're working for and what it is that you're doing. But the sort of the area that you're operating in is just vastly different. Virgin Atlantic don't have Shell's money. We were very fortunate at Shell in that we were able to hire the best agency staff to work with, the best contract staff to work with, and it was never really an issue, particularly at the outset. Virgin is very different. It's the airline business is all about margins. Every penny counts, and we really have to make do with what we've got. We don't have that sort of luxury of huge budgets and being able to hire in expertise from outside when we need it.
So how do you do that? That's kind of, because I think a lot of our clients are in that same position where you've got, sometimes you have the luxury and sometimes you don't. It's always harder when you don't have the luxury. How do you do it?
Yeah, so I think speed is certainly one thing. One of the things that I was really happy about at Shell is that for the first few months, arguably for the first year, we were given time to experiment and to try things, and there was no need really for us to start delivering results in that first year. It was about thinking, experimenting, understanding, questioning. We do that at Virgin Atlantic. We do it much quicker. Necessarily, we just haven't got the time to sort of spend doing that. So what we've found at Virgin is a way of delivering where we can release value incrementally. So it might be that we take a year to deliver a project, but we find a way of releasing a minimum viable product after 3 months and enhancing it after 6, so that we're starting to get the return on investment sooner. It's about delivering value sooner. That's one of the ways that we have to work differently at Virgin. I think another important factor is that, relatively speaking, Virgin is a small company. That we've got a lot more sort of control over the people that we work with. We can sort of wander from one part of the building to the next and go and talk to someone if we need to get an answer, which is Shell. Often these people are on a different continent altogether.
It's interesting. I was just going to ask about one of the things that I'm trying to bring into Shell is the idea that we need to have a bit more understanding and control of some of the things that we do. So very typically with really large organisations, things are given to external parties, agencies, or outsourcing. And I think certainly our time at Rentico, it was very similar to what Virgin sounds like, where we did have to do a lot of the tasks ourselves. And what I'm trying to do is trying to make sure that we understand what tasks go externally and what tasks really are core to the business. So understanding things like marketing data and understanding what the trends are and understanding, what's the most important content today. That should really be something that sits within the business. Things like the prototyping, it sounds like your team really would get an understanding of what's important to the customer and get that touch point. So I think that's something that businesses should learn from, is the fact that you've got to keep some skills in-house so that you do get that learning. Otherwise you can't move fast, because you always have to go through a chain of different parties to do things.
That's a really good point. And how do you get that skill in-house? Do you hire expertise, or do you get training, or do you upskill your own people?
It's funny, someone asked this question earlier. So I think the challenge is you can use the people internally to try and get things transferred. I think actually when you bring in your expertise, where people have done it in a variety of different companies, getting those learnings really help people understand and believe that it's possible. So I think that balance. I think I was saying earlier today about the fact that I think I too often try to get involved helping people, but actually that external influence really does help people believe that it's possible. So I think there are times when you do need to get people in externally. I think also sharing between other organisations that aren't competitive, trying to actually find out how someone's addressed the problem and then mutually share later on maybe. I think these are the bits that different companies are trying to explore.
Something that Virgin do very well is supporting people who want to move from different parts of the business into our sort of transformation function where I work. I've recruited recently project managers to work on senior projects who've never managed a project before, and the reason that we do that is because they're an expert in a certain part of the business, or maybe multiple parts of the business, because they've worked at Virgin for 10 years and they've worked in 2 or 3 different jobs in that time. We hire people based on behaviours and attitude, rather than how many Prince2 books they've read, or whether they can recite all 12 of the agile principles. We've had some amazing successes. There are a couple of people working with us right now who started off years ago working on a check-in desk at Heathrow Airport or Gatwick Airport, and they've worked in different operational roles, and then we've now got on working as project managers, leading teams that are delivering transformational change in those areas. And there's no, as I say, there's really sort of no amount of books that you can read that will give you better experience than having actually been there and done the job.
That's really great to hear. What about yourself? Because you've worked at lots of different companies and done lots of different jobs. What's been your journey so far? Because I think there might be some of our listeners that are thinking about how to get into that field. How do you get those jobs?
Yeah, it's quite interesting how our backgrounds have actually crossed over. So I started in air traffic control, believe it or not, back in the days of trying to pick up unidentified objects, trying to work out what it is.
No way.
And actually,
You started a career looking out for UFOs.
Well, yeah, that's true. But it's interesting that actually that technology, the concept, is actually very similar to what we're trying to do with digital marketing. We're looking at people coming to the site, picking it up. So it's really interesting. But I came from there, and I moved to Ernst & Young to look after. It was their technology risk advisory service, trying to work out how we can improve companies in processes, people, systems, and then from there joined Rentokil, where it was trying to bring that to life. So I think the Rentokil part was the first part where I really got properly involved in end-to-end projects, delivering really random things. I think that was my start of trying to focus on digital marketing at that point, realising, trying to address how we were taking data, how we're trying to use that to upsell, cross-sell and deliver, and that gave me the opportunity at Shell. But that was my background. So my background was quite fortunate that through technology falling into the marketing landscape.
So do UFOs exist?
Yeah, they definitely do. But yeah.
Let's get on about you.
So it strange start really. I was working as a labourer at British Steel in the industrial north of England, and I was applying for office work, anything. Office. I wanted to work indoors, and I wanted my hands to be clean at the end of the day. And I got a job. I was applying for anything and everything, and got a job as a Y2K project coordinator. So that dates me pretty well. And I walked into an office at Ericsson, who were doing a huge piece of work to prepare for Y2K, Millennium Bug preparations. Didn't have a clue what was going on, but was impressed by the nice warm office and clean people and canteen food. So just really worked my guts out and didn't stop. And it was actually towards the end of that piece of work the project manager got ill, and I kind of put my hand up and said, I've been watching every move this guy's made for the last 18 months, and so I kind of stepped into it that way, and then really sort of didn't know if that was just going to be, if I was going back to the steelworks, if that was just a one-off, but was open to anything. So I started travelling around. I did some work in different towns in the north of England, staying in lodgings. As the old saying goes, I've been in more digs than an archaeologist's trowel. So I was working short contracts in places like Warrington, Redditch, Birmingham, all over the place. Got a job in Amsterdam, almost by accident, and worked and lived out there for a year. Worked at Virgin Atlantic. This is my second go around at Virgin. I worked there as a project manager for some time. I worked in Australia on a contract. Chris and I worked at Rentokil, so really kind of I made sure that I was open to any opportunity that put itself in front of me.
So I was Chris, who felt very privileged because you showed me around the Virgin Atlantic sort of offices. Can you give us a bit of a flavour of the place you work?
It's fabulous. I'm not one, and Richard, you can back me up on this. I'm not one for sort of cheesy, statements. But
just leave that to me then.
that's definitely your territory. But I can honestly say, still to this day, I worked there for a few years, many years ago, and I've been back there now coming up for 18 months. Still to this day, when I walk through the door, I get just a little bit of pride, and I feel like I feel like a Virgin person.
What's it like?
It's a very so the building that we work in. There's two buildings based in Crawley near Gatwick Airport, and I work in a building called the Base, which is where we train cabin crew. We do an element of pilot training in there. And it's just a fantastic atmosphere. There's lots of cabin crew milling around. It's like a huge big warehouse, lots of very smart people in red uniforms and pilots' uniforms. Right slap bang in the centre of the office, we've got several what we call training rigs, which are full-size sections of aircraft fuselage, which are fully you walk inside one and it feels like you're on board an aircraft. They filmed part of some of the what's his name, the new James Bond fella, Daniel Craig. Yeah, they filmed a couple of those. You'll see a fight scene on an aircraft, and that was filmed in these training rigs in our office.
Wow.
They're completely lifelike, and it's where cabin crew will learn all of the sort of softer things, like how to serve customers and how to look after customers, but crucially how to run emergency procedures, and the work that they have to do and the training that they have to go through is mind blowing. I had no idea before I started working for an airline what it was like.
So what I found really fascinating about the office is, at one side, Shell is a massive organisation, and I think one of the biggest challenges for Shell is to get kind of a single customer view, is trying to get aligned, to get that kind of connection between the brand and the ultimate customer. With Virgin Atlantic, there's literally in the centre of the business, there is the CX hub, the customer experience hub. And everything around your corporate offices, where you have your marketing functions, your technical functions, your training functions, has the customer at the heart of that business. So you could, I've seen your offices, and you've got about 5 to 10 rooms, which are all product sprint rooms, and they've got many different developers in, and you're running agile sprints throughout. But you have your corporate function, your marketing functions, and you open up another door, and there's a pilot literally training how to fly a plane in the next door room. But the single unifying factor for all of these corporate marketing or customer services function is the customer is very much at the centre of that organisation. And for me, there's a reason why Virgin has such an extraordinary reputation in customer management, because it's baked in, and it's very much at the heart of that organisation, how they structure it in the business and the building. I'd highly encourage, if anyone has the opportunity to go, please go and have a look at the offices.
Well, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for telling us, giving us so much insight into your world. If there's one piece of advice you'd give to listeners to sort of move forward faster, what would that be? What do you think?
So be brave. Don't be afraid to try something. Pick a direction. Go in it full tilt. If it feels like you're not doing the right thing, or it turns out that you're not doing the right thing, throw your hands up. Try something else. I think that'll be my go.
Yeah, I think on my side, I've been really open up to this idea of tools down and really thinking about the problem. So there's a lady in our team at the moment who's really good at picking up when projects aren't quite focused and saying, right, we're all going to walk away, we're going to go into this breakout area, and we're all going to agree what we're trying to achieve today, tomorrow, and by the end of the week. And really trying to break it down to short deliverables. And if people haven't tried that, I promise you, try it once. It's absolutely revolutionary. I did it, a couple of months ago, and it was a shock to me. It was a culture change. It's like, we don't do this. No, we need to create a project plan. She was brilliant at influencing this change. And I think just trying that, you've got 3 or 4 people who perhaps overwhelmed with emails, overwhelmed with actually what they're delivering by the end of the week. Do this, bring people out and just try and draw it up on the whiteboard. If you can't do it, clearly the problem's too complicated, so break it down into small pieces so that people really understand what they're delivering by the end of today, by the end of the week. Brilliant.
So thank you very much. So I just want to finish off some thank you. Thank you, Chris Battersby from Virgin Atlantic, for being with us today. Thank you, Chris Muscutt from Shell, for joining us for our inaugural Fast Forward podcast. Thank you, Julia, for being here today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please look out for future podcasts. In the meantime, I'd highly encourage you to go to the wearebrightful.com website. We have a series of articles up there for how-to articles, and we have a monthly newsletter, the Fast Forward newsletter. Feel free to sign up for that. But please, you obviously ooze stamina because you've got to the end of the first Fast Forward podcast. Please tune in to our next podcast, and we hope to be sharing further insights to helping you move forward faster. Thank you.